Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Three years into my job, I had developed a reputation for being patient and professional, even with the most difficult callers. That reputation was about to be tested on what should have been just another Monday evening. The clock showed 4:59:45 p.m. My coat was already on, my computer was running its shutdown sequence, and I could practically taste the leftover lasagna waiting for me at home. That's when the phone rang. 15 seconds before closing time. I answered with my standard service desk greeting asking how I could help. The woman's voice was sharp and demanding from the start. She complained about not being able to log into her mobile phone, insisting that it needed to be fixed immediately. I politely offered to help and asked for her employee ID. She refused to provide it, demanding to speak with the mobile phone specialist instead. I explained that the mobile specialist had already left at 4 p.m., offering either to help troubleshoot the issue myself or create a ticket for tomorrow morning. This only made her angrier. She blamed me for the specialist's absence and demanded that I bring him back, calling us useless. I quickly muted the call and turned to my manager, who was packing up her things. I explained that the caller was being extremely hostile and asked if I should end the call. My manager walked over and plugged in her headset to listen. What followed was beyond anything I'd experienced in my 3 years at the desk. The caller started screaming, demanding immediate assistance. When I tried to calm her by addressing her as ma'am and offering solutions, she became even more irate. She boasted about working in the records department, claiming she was far more important than a service desk worker, and demanded I fix her phone immediately. For 40 excruciating minutes, she berated me, insulted my intelligence, and refused every solution I offered. My voice remained steady and professional, though my hands were shaking. Finally, I told her that since she wasn't comfortable with troubleshooting, I would create a priority ticket for the mobile specialist to contact her first thing tomorrow. She reluctantly agreed but threatened to report my supposed incompetence. After the call ended, I broke down in tears of frustration. My manager, who had heard everything, immediately brought me a cup of tea and told me to take a moment to collect myself. The next morning, my manager arrived with a box of expensive chocolates and went straight to the department head's office. A week later, I received a formal letter of apology from the caller. It seemed suspiciously formal, like someone had forced her to write it. Then she suddenly vanished from the office. The truth came out during an emergency IT security meeting. The caller had been using another employee's credentials, someone who coincidentally had the same first name as her. The real account owner worked in child protection services, handling highly sensitive cases. Our entitled caller had somehow obtained her coworker's username and password and had been accessing confidential files she had no clearance to view. The investigation revealed she had been snooping through child protection cases for months. When she got locked out of the phone, which wasn't even hers to begin with, she panicked and called us, inadvertently exposing her illegal activities. She was immediately terminated and faced criminal charges for unauthorized access to confidential information and violation of data protection laws. The incident triggered a complete overhaul of our security protocols. As for me, I not only got paid overtime for those 40 minutes, but also received a commendation for maintaining professionalism under extreme duress. The department implemented a new policy requiring all calls to be recorded and reviewed if an employee reports abuse, and they established stricter penalties for workplace harassment. The chocolates were delicious, by the way. Dark chocolate truffles, my favorite. I've loved comics since I was a kid. Even after the accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down 3 years ago, my passion for superheroes never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger. Those characters taught me that limitations don't define who you are. It's what you do with what you have that matters. When comic convention finally came to our city, my friends insisted I should cosplay. I was hesitant at first, but they convinced me that my wheelchair could actually add a unique twist to any character. After much thought, I decided on Catwoman. I spent weeks perfecting the costume, making sure it worked well with my wheelchair. I even added some LED lights to the wheels to give it that extra flair. The convention was amazing. People kept stopping me for photos, complimenting my creativity, and some even asked how I modified the costume to work so well with the chair. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a true superhero. That's when it happened. I was taking a break near the main hall with my two friends when I heard someone screaming. I turned around to see a woman storming toward me with a red face. She was demanding to know what I thought I was doing. When I asked her what she meant, she became even more enraged. She started yelling about how I was making a mockery of Catwoman by dressing up as her. My friends immediately moved closer to me, with one of them telling her to back off and asking what her problem was. The woman completely lost it then. She screamed that Catwoman was her favorite character and that I was ruining everything. She pointed at me sitting there saying I was making Catwoman look weak and pathetic. I tried to defend myself, explaining that I wasn't making anyone look weak and was just celebrating a character I loved. She wouldn't listen. She started ranting about how I looked just like Catwoman, my face, my build, but because I was in a wheelchair, I had destroyed her mental image of the character forever. By this point, people were starting to gather around us. The woman then demanded that I stand up and pose properly. When I explained that I couldn't because I was paralyzed, she shouted that she didn't care and insisted that I get up anyway. Before anyone could stop her, she grabbed my arms and tried yanking me up. My friends immediately jumped in, but not before I fell out of my chair onto the convention center floor. One of my friends screamed at her, asking if she was insane. They shoved her away while several bystanders rushed to help me back into my chair. Someone in the crowd called for security. The woman kept yelling, accusing me of faking my disability for attention and insisting that Catwoman wouldn't be disabled. Two security guards arrived within minutes, with one having already called the police after seeing what happened. When the security guard told her to come with them, she protested, saying I should be the one removed because I was ruining the convention for real fans. My hands were shaking, but I managed to tell them I wanted to press charges. She responded by yelling that she was only trying to help me stop pretending. The police arrived shortly after. They took statements from multiple witnesses who had recorded the whole incident on their phones. Turns out attempting to forcibly remove someone from a wheelchair is considered assault. Who would have thought? As they were leading her away, she was still yelling about how I'd ruined Catwoman for her forever. One of the police officers, who turned out to be a comic fan himself, told me my costume was the best Catwoman he'd seen all day. The convention organizers were incredibly apologetic. They gave me and my friends VIP passes for the remaining days and arranged for me to meet some of the comic artists who were there. One of them even did a quick sketch of Catwoman in a tricked-out wheelchair, which is now framed on my wall. The woman was charged with assault and ended up getting banned from all future conventions in our city. I later found out through social media that she had a history of harassing cosplayers at other conventions, claiming they were ruining various characters for not looking exactly like them. I still cosplay at conventions. In fact, I've expanded my repertoire. My Professor X costume is a particular hit, and I'm working on a wheelchair-adapted Batman for next year. The incident shook me up, but it also showed me how many people in the community have my back. For every entitled person who thinks they own a character, there are hundreds more who understand what these heroes truly represent: courage, determination, and the power to inspire others, regardless of how you look or what challenges you face. 6 months ago, my sister lost her daughter in a terrible accident. The grief hit her hard, and she started drinking heavily. At first, we all understood. Losing a child is something no parent should ever experience. But what began as mourning soon spiraled into something much darker. I'd always been close to my nephew. When his mom's drinking got worse, I couldn't stand by and watch him suffer. That's why I invited them both to move in with me. I had a stable job at a local warehouse, my own apartment, and thought I could help them get back on their feet while my sister worked through her grief. The first month was okay. My sister would drink, but she'd keep it together enough to function. Then the rent started going unpaid. She promised to contribute her share, but would spend the money on alcohol instead. The first time we faced eviction, I scraped together every penny I had. I took extra shifts, sold my jewelry, even donated plasma, anything to keep a roof over our heads. After that close call, my sister promised to change. She even found a job at a local diner. I thought things were finally looking up, but here we are again 3 months later facing eviction for the second time. 2 days ago, she got her paycheck. I asked her if she had transferred the rent money. She claimed she was sending it right then and asked to borrow my car for work, saying hers was out of gas. I reluctantly agreed but told her to come straight home after her shift. She promised she would. At 2:30 a.m. my phone rang. My sister was slurring her words, telling me she was still out with friends. When I asked if she was drunk and questioned her about my car's whereabouts, she insisted she wasn't drunk and was perfectly fine. I told her to just bring my car back when she was sober. That was the last real conversation I had with her. The next day, my nephew tried calling her repeatedly, pleading with her to answer because we were worried about her. There was no response. Then we got the call from her friend who told us that my sister had been in an accident and had abandoned the car at the scene. My heart dropped. The car was my only way to get to work, the only way we could make money to possibly save our housing situation. I filed a missing persons report right away, but the police found the car before they found her. It was totaled, abandoned on the side of the road. Today, my boss called. He tried to be understanding but explained they needed someone reliable, implying I couldn't keep my job without transportation. I had to acknowledge the reality and tell him I would have to quit. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my sister finally texted my nephew. She told him she was fine and demanded we stop bothering her, saying we didn't understand what she was going through because she had lost a child. My nephew responded by pointing out that now he was losing both his home and his mom. She lashed back, saying we had no right to make her feel guilty and that she deserved to cope however she wanted. That's when I'd had enough. I called the police again and told them I wanted to press charges for the car. The officer instructed me to come down to the station to file a report. 2 days later, they found my sister at a motel. She was arrested for destruction of property, drunk driving, and leaving the scene of an accident. Her friend later told us she'd spent her entire paycheck on alcohol and hotel rooms, partying with people she'd met at bars. As for my nephew and me, things worked out better than expected. After hearing our story, my boss offered to let me work remotely doing inventory management until I could save up for another car. A local community organization helped us find temporary housing, and my nephew's school counselor connected us with resources for families in crisis. My sister is now in a court-mandated rehabilitation program. The judge gave her a choice: get help or face jail time. My nephew still texts her sometimes, but we're focusing on building our own life now. It's not perfect, but we're making it work. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born with. I did feel guilty about pressing charges, but watching my nephew finally sleep peacefully at night makes me know I made the right choice. He deserves stability, and sometimes tough love is the only way to help someone hit rock bottom so they can finally start climbing back up. I never had what you'd call a normal childhood. I grew up as an only child with an alcoholic mother, meant I had to become the adult in the house way too early. By age 10, I was already making sure the bills were paid on time and there was enough food in the fridge. My father wasn't in the picture. He left when I was 3, probably couldn't handle my mother's drinking anymore. During my teenage years, things got worse. I'd come home from school to find her passed out on the couch, empty bottles scattered around. On her better days, she'd cry and tell me I was the only one who understood her, the only one she could trust. I became her therapist, her caretaker, her emotional support system, all while trying to navigate my own life. I remember one day begging her to eat something. She just brushed off my concern, telling me I worried too much and trying to get me to sit and talk about my day instead. That's how it always went. She'd deflect, change the subject, make it about something else. I learned to pick up the pieces, clean up her messes, and keep our lives somewhat functional. Then, a few years ago, everything came crashing down. Her liver started failing. Years of alcohol abuse finally caught up with her. I was in my mid-20s, finally building my own life when she dropped the bomb. She told me the doctor said she needed a liver transplant and asked if I would get tested to see if I was a match. Those words hit me like a truck. She asked it so casually, like she was asking me to pick up groceries. I remember standing there frozen, unable to process what she was asking. The idea of literally giving her a piece of my body after everything she'd taken from me emotionally was too much. I told her I needed time to think about it. She said that was fine but reminded me not to take too long, saying the doctors emphasized how important time was. I started seeing a therapist right after that conversation. The guilt was eating me alive. I knew deep down I couldn't do it, wouldn't do it, but the weight of that decision was crushing me. Then fate intervened. A young man passed away and his liver went to my mother. She had to be sober for a year before the surgery, and she managed it. For a while after the transplant, things were different. She was clear-headed, present, actually acting like a mother for once. I started to hope that maybe this was her second chance. But about a year ago, I noticed the signs. The slurred words during our phone calls. The emotional manipulation creeping back in. I tried to ignore it, tell myself I was being paranoid. Then came the visit to my aunt's house 2 weeks ago. I watched her trying to hide her drinking at first, taking sips when she thought no one was looking. As the night went on, she got sloppy, stopped caring who saw. When I asked if she should be drinking, she just said yes. When I brought up everything that had happened, she dismissed me, telling me not to start and insisting she was fine. She could barely walk by the end of the night. The next morning, she asked if I was mad at her. When I said no but expressed concern about her drinking, she tried to manipulate the situation by threatening to leave if I was going to be mad. When I didn't beg her to stay like she wanted, she stormed out. After talking with my therapist and friends, I decided enough was enough. I sent her a text saying I needed space. She responded by playing the victim, saying she didn't understand why I was doing this to her and asking how I could treat my mother this way. When I pointed out that she got a second chance at life because someone literally died so she could live, she dismissed me as being dramatic and claimed she was allowed to live her life. I agreed but told her I was allowed to not watch her destroy herself again. That was 2 weeks ago. She's been sending manipulative texts ever since, trying to guilt me into talking to her again. Yesterday, I finally sent her one last message. I told her that someone gave their life so she could have a second chance, that their family lost them forever but agreed to give her their liver because they believed it would save a life. I explained that she wasn't just disrespecting herself anymore, she was disrespecting their memory and their family's sacrifice. I told her not to contact me again until she was ready to get help. Then I blocked her number. My aunt called me later saying I was being cruel and that she's still your mother. But for the first time in my life, I feel at peace with my decision. Sometimes the most entitled people are the ones closest to us, and sometimes the hardest thing to do is to stop enabling them. I've started volunteering at a local organ donation awareness organization. It feels right honoring the memory of the donor who saved my mother's life, even if she won't. Maybe someone else will get a second chance and actually make it count. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.